Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of our Homestead from Scratch here. I'm here with John Tejan and Logan Hyde, and I'm Greg Dowd. Welcome to our show tonight, and we're going to be talking about plants. So John has something to put together for us on a presentation on plants, but before we begin, how's everybody doing this week?
Excellent. It's going to get a little cold this week, I think. We're going to get that cold front coming through here. So I've got a few chores to do around to take care of. I'm building these boxes for our outdoor cats to go into when it gets really cold. Because last Christmas we had visitors, we had visiting dogs, visiting cats, had all my dogs and all my cats, and it got really cold and everybody was inside, and let me tell you, that wasn't a lot of fun.
All the animals wreaking havoc inside. Huh?
Oh yeah, and the cats weren't happy and the dogs weren't happy, and it's like, this made you want to drink more, I guess. I don't know. Well, yeah, and that's when I was out of water too, right? For 2 weeks. Although the visiting animals left, but it was still brutally cold during that period of time, and it was the cats just couldn't be outside without some sort of shelter, because they'd kind of been inside outside cats, and then when the house got too full, it's like, y'all are outdoor cats now, which they're fine with that, but when it gets cold, they need a little protection. There's always the stack of hay bales out in the shed that they can burrow down in and get out of the wind and stay fairly warm if they had to. So I'm not too worried about it.
Well, great. How was your week, Logan?
Pretty good. I've been over here trying to make sure I ain't got nothing in my teeth. I just got done eating some duck hearts and some shiitake mushrooms. And it's been great. Been doing a lot of stuff. Just getting ready for this cold weather too. We got some stuff to do. Still, I've got I don't know if I mentioned last time, but I did get the ducks processed, so that's out of the way. Which I'm just gonna wait for some colder weather to do the pigs. They're still pretty small, but we've got some good stuff going on. Been a pretty good week. Been a little busy, but other than that, everything's good.
Excellent. It's been crazy busy where I work. My 9 to 5 this week, and so getting caught up with that and attempting to get some rest today. So other than that, it's been good. So John, if you got what you want to talk about tonight, ready to
go. I'll pull up the presentation here in a second, but I just wanted to kind of, let everybody know what this is kind of going to be about. Just taking a very basic approach to plants, since, growing plants for food is a good thing, and it's something I think we all want to be successful at. So I'm going to have a multi episode presentation about plants. This first one's going to be fairly basic, but I'll go into the different parts of the plant, roots and seeds and leaves and how they all work a little bit more in detail past what I'm going to do in this introduction here. But I think it's just a good starting point for education on plants. Some of this is going to seem like it's, from your 6th grade biology class, or if you took it in college, it wasn't much different. And I did both, it's like, okay, whatever. It's basic, but I think once you I guess relearn it and re-examine it for the first time and actually like pay attention, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you're talking about an ecosystem, whether it's your local environment or just the larger ecosystem. Because unfortunately, a lot of science, a lot of the way we learn is not a system based. It's just kind of like you just learn the terms and what they are and definitions and maybe a little this and that. But I think by looking at the whole system and understand how all that works together with animals and the environment, is going to give you a better understanding when you go and fart around in your garden and wonder why things aren't going right, and there's a few things that you have to get right. It's not rocket science, it's plant science. So
that's what I should have titled tonight. It's not rocket science, it's plant science.
There's actually a botanist that she says plant or botany is not rocket science. It's much more complicated.
True that, and natural systems man-made systems are pretty easy because we build them, right?
Yep.
Natural systems, we're still after how many thousands of years still trying to learning new things and trying to figure out actually how things work, right? We know how a rocket works, because we designed it, but an ecosystem.
I didn't design it, but
yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Hold on. Now. You may not understand rockets.
Somebody designed it.
Somebody figured it out and put a blueprint out there and figured it
Bill
out.
Mollison always said. He said you can't measure anything that you create that you didn't create. Is what I think the quote says. And so you think about it. If you measure a box, that you build. Of course, you're going to be able to get the measurements on that. But if you try to measure a tree and its surface area, by the time you get done, the tree's already changed.
Or you're dead,
Or you're dead.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll try to pull this up here. We kind of went through this. Something about that. Let's see what we get here.
There you go.
Boom. There we go. Let me get this over here and try to get this in a. I don't know. I'm not real good at PowerPoint, but y'all can see it. So I'll go ahead and start there. Golly. It'd be nice to get that off to the side. I don't know if I do this. Did I lose everybody on that one?
No, I think I think you should just go to present or something like that on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I did that, and I've done that before, and it messes things up. So
don't worry about it then. Just scroll through your slides.
Yeah, I only got a handful of slides, so it's not too complicated, like I said. So we're talking about plants tonight, obviously. Because as I said, that's really important when you're getting some trying to grow food, and that's either for yourself or for your animals, either one, right? And I think let me go ahead to this next one, the kind of the agenda. I'm basically going to go over the introduction, talking about plants. I'm going to cover photosynthesis and respiration, basically two of the large energy systems in a plant. And I think that's a really great place to start out when talking about plants and why they're so important in the ecosystem. Because plants, let me see here. Introduction, I think I probably actually said. Plants, unlike animals, can actually create their own energy sources. And they do that through photosynthesis. But because they're actually they produce energy, and their own energy, and that additional energy they have in their leaves, in the roots maybe, or whatever, or in the fruit or in the seeds or whatever part, that energy is made available to other animals to eat, right? So that's kind of the beginning of the food chain, as I have down there, is starts with plants. And I mean, if you want to get, I'm not going to be super technical on my terms here, because I think you can waste a lot of time differentiating between, like the most basic plant is algae, right? And we know algae is the very beginning of time, was some of the first single cell organisms, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And algae was able to, and the basic, process they use is photosynthesis. Most algae, I think there's some blue-green algae that's in the ocean that might not need it. But anyway, like I said, I'm not going to get real technical, but photosynthesis makes that happen. And the plants create, so they're creating energy, and they're creating energy so they can carry out their normal functions, just like we eat every day. So we have enough energy to walk around and do what we need to do and maintain our body. They use that to grow, obviously, grow larger, and eventually produce seeds or fruit, or however they reproduce. All that energy has to come from somewhere, and they create most of that themselves. And also, there's an excess amount of energy that the plant doesn't use, that it actually is made available to the microbiome and microbes in the form of root exudates. And we'll go over that more when we kind of talk about roots and kind of dive into what that actually means. So there are two essential things in this process that plants don't necessarily that they require. It's sunlight for photosynthesis, obviously the key process in a plant, and water, which is they're going to get from the roots, right? But and they're essential. But as gardeners, or as homesteaders, as people who grow plants, we need to understand sunlight and water, because although I'm talking very basic about plants, they need sunlight and water. Depending on what plant or tree or that you're growing, their sunlight needs and their water needs can be different, and they are different depending. Like Logan, that. Those willow trees will grow really well in a wet spot. I mean, they just love the water, and they love soaking up as much water as they can, and actually it can be a problem if they're around septic tanks, because they'll find water that you didn't know was there. But and then there's other plants that are very frugal with water and don't need a lot of water, and you just need to know through experience and maybe some reading and research to find out what levels of sunlight and water they need. Those are two real basic things you got to get right when you're gonna grow anything. It's like, do I have enough available sunlight? Do I have enough water? So on and so forth. And we've talked about soil. We can go into that later at another time, especially when we talk about roots. They need oxygen too, but we'll kind of. I didn't throw that in there. So those are two the main things that they need. And so let's go further. Let's talk about photosynthesis. And I think we've probably all heard the term used many times, but that is that key process that plants with sunlight and some water and carbon dioxide that they pull out of the atmosphere will create their energy source, as well as some additional oxygen. The oxygen is really a byproduct of photosynthesis. It's not a direct. It's not what's trying to be accomplished, but it does provide additional oxygen. And I can go into all of the chemical formulas for what a simple sugar or glucose is, and carbon dioxide, CO2, and water, it's H2O. But when you start playing with all these things, they're all using the same three things: hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, right? In different forms. And that's all chemistry is. Again, I'm oversimplifying, is these molecules in their process break apart pieces of a molecule and reassemble them into something else, whether it be water, oxygen, sugar, whatever it might be. So I just use the names of what those chemicals represent as opposed to going into the chemical names, because I think people's eyes glaze over and it reminds them of taking chemistry, which is not a fond memory for most people if you took it, because it's just not everybody's cup of tea. So yeah, so the photosynthesis is what happens in plants through the chlorophyll that's in the leaves, or in all over the plant. But usually the leaves are as some of the pasture experts call, those are the big solar panels out there in your garden, which are soaking up sunlight. And I think, Logan, you talked about that, I think the last time, whether it was actually in part of the stream or it was after the stream in our little post stream chat that we had, is that energy, all energy comes from the sun at one point. It all interacts with this planet, and the byproduct is the creation of energy, and it's many different forms on the planet. So and photosynthesis being the key process with plants of turning sunlight, it takes carbon dioxide out of the air, also water, which is already in the plant at that point, and it transforms that in photosynthesis into basically glucose or sugar, and eventually, depending on the plant, into starch when it's stored in the roots. We'll go over roots at another time. But and all starches is just a complex conglomeration of sugar. It's a complex sugar. It's just sugar that's been they're larger molecules, basically. The sugars that have been improved, the basic glucose, and it gets bigger and makes it starch. Again, that's a lot of chemistry in there, but starch and sugar are basically the same thing. Chemically, obviously, they taste different when we eat them, but it's all the same thing. And it lets off oxygen. Now, the part of the plant that this actually happens at is it's the stoma. Again, a technical word. It's the site on the leaf where this actually happens. There's basically an opening in the leaf where this carbon dioxide is combined with water, and along with the sunlight and the chlorophyll creates these sugars. And it's there's an important process. Obviously, the more leaves you have, the more photosynthesis you can accomplish, the more energy you create for the plant, but it also requires more energy to maintain that. So it's kind of that vicious circle there. You have to have enough energy to support the plant, and that's one of the things about photosynthesis. It only happens during the daytime, so that process of creating energy for that plant to use has to not, and it's constantly using energy during the day as well. Probably it needs some of that energy to conduct photosynthesis. But but that plant at night continues to grow and multiply, and there's energy needs for that plant constantly. So photosynthesis has to accomplish all of that energy capture when there's sun, because at nighttime there's a different process that goes on. So basically, after photosynthesis, you have these sugar, and I'll call them sugar molecules. There's they're actually stored in two. Again, I don't want to get into the chemistry too much. Is ATP and ADP, I believe it is, and they're androzine triphosphate, I guess, is something I forget the actual name of it. But the only difference between that is that, let's see, did I have it in here? Yes. And we'll talk about respiration, but you'll see there's stored energy and there's free energy, and that's that's what the process of respiration does. It takes that sugar that's been created and that's stored in the plant, and when the plant wants to use it, it's got to go through another process called respiration. It's no different than well, it is different. I'm trying to make things simple here, but it's very similar to the way animals and the way we breathe as well, right? In order to create energy for our body, we have to breathe in oxygen, and the energy in our body and the sugars in our body are used to, move our muscles, make things grow, right? The same thing. It's an energy creation system, but it's energy that's already that's stored energy and turns it into free energy, and it's almost the exact reverse of photosynthesis, right? You're taking the sugars that you created, combining with the oxygen that you've already created, and you're turning that back into carbon dioxide, which is the waste product, water, and then free energy for the plant to maintain itself and grow and do whatever do whatever that process is. So basically, there's not much more to the basic parts of plants. You guys may have some questions or some observations over there about photosynthesis, or maybe there's a mental model you have in your own mind how all this happens, and it may be an easy way to remember it. Stories of that you might have about it, but that's really kind of quick introduction of photosynthesis and respiration, those two key processes that happen in a plant, that and especially photosynthesis, obviously, because that's kind of the linchpin for everything. It holds everything together, right? It's the actual creation of energy in a plant that eventually feeds us animals and the microbiome as well. So it provides energy in all those different steps. So
John, I'm confused.
Yes.
I thought carbon dioxide was bad for everything and was going to cause everything to die.
Right. And
what you're telling me is that carbon dioxide is what plants crave?
Yeah, it is
actually it's Brawndo. Sorry to correct everyone, but they crave Brawndo, not carbon dioxide. So.
But yeah, and that's always funny when people who obviously concerned about the environment, but it's carbon dioxide, it's poisonous, it's bad. Cows produce it, plants produce it, everything produces it. Well, it's all just part of the energy cycle in plants, in our own bodies. I mean, when we breathe, we breathe in oxygen and we create energy in our body and start moving around. We exhale carbon dioxide. Are we polluting the planet? I mean, cow burps, people farts. I don't know what the problem is. It's causing the environment to do what it does, but it is a natural process. It's not a poison. It's anything's going to be a poison if you overdose on it, right? But CO2 is not a greenhouse gas, because it's there present whether there's human activity going on or not. Now, the sulfur compounds that come from burning petroleum and all of those other things in the atmosphere that are very detrimental, yeah, it's probably important that we clean that up, but CO2 is like, and there are people who kind of, have fun with this when they're but it's true though. As the CO2 concentrate, that's not me. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. Throwing
Well,
up
I
a
just
little
pulled
natural.
up example of what you're talking about there.
Yeah,
is the stoma in the
yeah.
plant.
That's
This is
that's kind of the mouth of the plant, right?
an electron microscope image of a tomato leaf, apparently.
Yes, delicious. But I mean, increasing levels of CO2 actually, plants actually will even use more of that and actually flourish even more. But we don't want to like just poison the atmosphere with CO2 just so we have plants to grow.
I know in the aquarium trade, I've never done it, but it is really common for people to have CO2 tanks and to diffuse CO2 into the water to have their plants grow better. There are a lot of plants that are, submerged plants that just about have to have it. And of course, in a natural setting, they get it. But CO2 is extremely important for the happiness and healthy living of plants. I mean, trees are I think it's 98% carbon dioxide if you get down to what they're actually breathing in and using to build their bodies. So super, super important. And was that the end of the slides?
Yeah, I just
okay.
Real basic introduction there. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. But.
Before I started commenting, just in case I went down some kind of rabbit trail, I didn't want to disrupt the flow of the presentation. Yeah, didn't want to have to make 3 right turns to get back. So anyway, for me, as far as just thinking about what it is that plants need and how to care for them, and remembering as far as water, air, and all that, and sunlight, the stuff that they need to grow. One of the things I like to think about is think about yourself, okay? Plants are a lot like us in many ways. If you need water to survive, right? But you don't need to drink water all day long. You need air, you need sunlight, but you don't need too much sunlight. That's something that a lot of people don't realize, is you can get to a point to where you can actually stress the plant out from too much sun. And especially depending on what kind of plant it is. But even some of your really, really sun-loving plants, like even, say corn. Here in the South, we have some pretty brutal summers, and it can actually be beneficial to have, somewhat of some afternoon shade for even those sun-loving plants, because the heat and the sun can get to them and can really wear them out. So you just got to think about what you would like. It's not too much water, it's not too much sun, and it's not, too much of anything.
Right.
Air, of course, you got to always have that, and the plants always need to breathe. And that's another thing. There's very few plants that that their roots will survive in anaerobic conditions. And most of them do need some air, and you can do that by not drowning the roots. But really and truly, for me, I grow some stuff in containers, but I think it's best to always have plants in the ground, just because the ground actually breathes. Just like you have with tides in the ocean, the water's rising. You're going through that bubble with the moon of the water rising and falling. Same thing happens underground. So the water that's in the ground is moving up and down and causing air to be pulled into the ground as the tide lowers. And so a lot of places where, if you've got any kind of air pockets or tunnels going underground, you're getting that, respiration of air and oxygen coming into the ground. So plants really benefit from being planted in the ground, because oxygen naturally can get into the soil. Now, there's places where that's not going to apply because the soil's so compacted. But if you have a good biology and you have good little critters that are making those openings, especially even though I hate fire ants, I hate them. And I've had people that have had different experiences in gardens, but for the most part, like with my trees, any place where there's been fire ants, not only are they good for like pest control, but they actually aerate the soil. And a lot of plants that have a fire ant bed next to them outgrow the other plants because they're getting that oxygen to the roots. So
that's good, because I got a bunch of them. How about I have to tell you this. I was real disappointed. I went out in the field and looked at some of my trees, some of my poplars and black locust, and I made a huge mistake while I was moving the cows. Is I didn't put the fence around my trees, and the deer just stripped the bark off about 4 or 5 of my poplars. I mean, all the way around. The good thing about those, they're real resilient, and they'll just sprout out of the ground and they'll be fine. But I was real disappointed. And then one at the bottom of one of the black willows, or black locust, he just big old armadillo hole just crawled right up underneath there, man. And I'm like, I hope you survive. That's the thing about planting trees out in the field. They kind of got to do all the work themselves. You can't be pampering them too much, because there's just too many to take care of.
I tell you, John, something that I've become a really big advocate of over the years as I've learned about trees is planting trees in groups, even in tight knit groups, like planting them on 5-foot centers or even less at times. And I've heard people talk about outcompeting root systems, but you can go down to where we're building Greg's cabin, and I can prove to you that is just a load of crap. Yes, there are trees that will outcompete others and they'll grow, but there are some trees, they can grow so close together. Greg has, I believe it's a silver maple, and I think a cherry growing right next to each other. I mean, they are literally almost about to graft together. Now, one of those trees is eventually going to win out, or they're both going to die. But you can really get in there close. I would say like the size that you expect the tree to be, maybe leave it to where there'll be a couple of feet in between that, but you can get them really close. And they're also more storm resistant like that. They weave with their roots these mats, and it makes it harder for say you have a tornado come through. Those trees that are really woven together, it's really hard for strong winds to pull them up, because they've got just this incredible mat with tap roots and everything anchoring them into the soil. If there's a tree by itself, it can get knocked out pretty easy. But the more you plant together and closely, almost in like little islands, the better. And I've noticed that with a lot of trees, especially if you can get some that are of different species and some of the same species, because they do a lot of communication and a lot of mutual aid between the trees when you plant them close enough to where they can reach and not have to depend so much on the mycelial network.
Yeah, and one of the you kind of made that point about anaerobic environments for roots. Not a good thing, and there's two ways that happens. One, it's waterlogged and it just can't get any oxygen, and number two, it's severely compacted, where literally all of the oxygen space in the soil has been pressed out, and there's just no oxygen in the soil. They might survive, but they're not going to thrive in a compacted soil. So that's why, when you hear about compaction and why it's bad, it's because it's pressing out all of the air out of the soil, and things just don't really grow that well. I mean, the roots really have to work hard to find that oxygen. Same thing with water. When there are plants like willows that do well in waterlogged soil, and but most plants, not necessarily talking about trees, but most plants, that's just, they don't have the system to be and the type of roots that can survive in continually wet soil. I always love it when you look at you look on a packet of seeds or on a tree or whatever, and it's like, Well, it does well in well-drained soil. I mean, it's like on literally every
plant.
plant and every seed. It's well, plant it in well-drained soil. It's like, yeah, I guess that's pretty important,
Yeah, it does
hopefully-
best when it has sunlight.
Yes, sunlight and it drains well. I mean, and they say that, but and that's why I try to cover. We cover things like that because there's something. There's actually real context to that. It's not just a throwaway phrase of well-drained soil and good sunlight. You do have to get those things down, or you can throw all the Miracle-Gro you want on it, and you can buy all the fancy microorganisms and throw it in there. But if you don't have the sunlight and the water thing fixed, you're not going to get very far. And I probably, here I am talking about this, and I'm like, I planted my my garlic, and it's all up. It's probably 6 inches tall. I planted it about maybe not quite a month, probably a month ago. But when you're planting things in the late summer or early fall, you got to be real cognizant of, well, when spring comes around, where's the sun going to be? Because it's not the same place it was when you planted it in the fall, And so I'm probably going to get one end of the bed's probably going to get a little bit more shade than it probably needs. But, those are mistakes that you make those mistakes all the time, because, especially if you're doing permaculture and you've taken a permaculture design course and all of the different zones that you plant things in, it's like, well, you only have so much area for zone 1, man. and you're like, well, this won't work and that won't work because it doesn't have this. It's like, well, there's a spot over here. I'll try that, and then it's like, 6 months later, it looks a little different, if you haven't been paying attention, or you bought this happens to everybody. You buy the plants before you figure out where you're going to put them in the ground. And then it's like, damn. And then you get in a hurry and you plan, well, I'll just put them over here. And then, next year it's like, well, these aren't doing very well, and that's all about planning and preparation, but everybody gets that, that gardening bug under their skin in the spring and or even in the winter. You go through the catalogs and you're buying seeds and you're ordering plants, and it's like, they got to have a place to go though when they get here. It's kind of like getting an animal and bringing it home. It's like, oh hell, what do we do now with this puppy? It's well, you can make provisions for that, but that's life. Well, we all do it. It's not a problem unless you keep doing it over and over again.
You mentioned one thing about the ATP and the ADP, and I just had to go look that up because I didn't know. It's been a while since I've looked into.
I mean, those same things happen in our body that happens in plants. A little different, there's a little chemical, composition, but ATP and ADP are, those are prime energy sources for pretty much most living things. So the chemistry works for both plants and animals. Nobody ever really told me that when I was in school. It's really, because they wanted to compartmentalize your learning on plants here and animals over here, instead of going, well, it's the same system. It's a little different, obviously. Plants don't have a mouth and lungs, but that chemical process that happens is the same. And so all this stuff, you can extend it to the animals you raise, and being cognizant of their needs as well. Because animals need the same thing. They do better in sunlight if they can get some fresh air and sunlight and clean water and nutrient rich food, and so those processes are key to most living things. And I think we kind of forget that sometimes. It's not a problem. We don't get tested on that Jeopardy question all the time, but it happens. But as far as trees go, I don't differentiate between plants and trees. But their structures are a little bit different, but the same thing goes for trees as well. One thing, and this is not necessarily part of this part of this subject, but it's especially this time of year, it's fall, and people sometimes want to go out and start doing some pruning because the leaves are off the tree and they're like, oh, okay,
Too early.
And that's because we don't take time to understand for the plant what would be the best time that I'm going to prune, and you're going, well, in the fall, because all the leaves are off and I can see the structure of the tree and I can trim and everything. The problem is every time you cut open a tree, or we'll use trees, same thing with plants, when you cut a limb off, you have the best pair of side cutters and pruning shears you want to, nice and sharp, nice clean cut. But that is an open wound there that plant has to heal itself with. And the problem is these plants are going dormant right now. They're not growing hardly at all. And you just start cutting into them and they have to repair themselves. They're not ready for that. And they don't do a really good job of sealing up that wound. And that may be open all winter long and you get bugs in there and viruses or whatever.
Well,
it's just like an open wound on people. And if it's not able to fix that in a reasonable amount of money, reasonable amount of time, you could, cause some problems later down the line.
And that's why I always advocate in the very last hours of winter. So, maybe like at the most a month before everything's going to start budding out. Because during that dead of winter, you're not going to have the bug pressure. You're not going to have the fungal and stuff like that during that time. And you're doing it when the tree it's dead asleep. It's like it's in REM sleep, and then once you hit that next month and everything starts to bud out, those sugars start to rush from the roots. And you're going to get a lot of really good healing. So if you try like right now, even though I prune trees just because I do some fodder and stuff, I do it all year round, just about. Right. But you got to think about it like, there's a difference between getting a haircut and getting decapitated. So right. If you're going to like coppice, pollard, needs to be done in the dead of winter, or if you're going to take off really big chunks. But if you're doing stuff like, for fodder or whatever, you can do that, but it needs to be the smaller limbs. They always recommend that you do anywhere from 2-year-old to 5-year-old growth. And it needs to be, not too much, or it needs to be done at a specific time where it's not going to be an issue. But trees are also a little more resilient than we give them credit for. I know that just because I've seen stuff like I have trees that are in particular spots that I don't want them in. You go to cut them down, and guess what? They're just like, I don't care. They grow right back. And like, yeah, you don't want me here, but I want to be here. So screw you, dude. I'm coming back. And
well, I did that this past summer. I've got a bunch of Chickasaw plums, which do really well here. Because they're native. they're not from Asia. They're not some hybrid, from someplace else. They're native to here, and they did real well. But man, we got one of them windstorms on top of this hill and broke both of them in half. And it's like I just cut the top off. I just cut it off about 3 foot, and it just started sprouting from the, It'll probably have plums on it next year. They grow pretty fast. one good thing was, since we kind of got on to pruning here, I did my my blackberries. The thing is you wait now for blackberries. You can tell what you're supposed to prune because they're dead. Those canes are dead. You just come up, flip them off, and you can see the green ones. And it's like, it's so easy to take care of those this time of year. You know,
Yeah.
they get pretty bushy in the summertime, and they kind of, and mine are all thornless, so I don't have to work. You know, thankfully they did invent that.
John, you had mentioned talking about, like, compartmentalizing everything in schools and, making sure everything's in these little boxes. That's something that I like to, I've made some videos about it and like to stress to people that plants are living, thinking beings. And so if you will look at plants like they're just as smart as you will have much more success, just like you were mentioning with the water and then looking for septic tanks. Not only that, but plants have the ability to hear. And they will go, if there is a pipe and that pipe is leaking no water, there's no moisture around the pipe, that plant can hear that running water and it will go to it.
Wow.
So you've got to be careful when you're doing that. Same thing, plants have sight, they have smell, they have memory, they have the ability to hear. I mean, they are more like us than we know. Now, of course, they don't share the same type of language. They don't share the same type of movement, but it's just a different type of intelligence. And when you think about that, it'll make you a lot more savvy on stuff like that. So you might think like, well, as long as I don't plant it next to the septic, but what if you've got a big water main? Or what if you've got a tree planted close to where you're, from the meter to your house, there's a pipe there, and you plant it there, and you end up having a broken pipe later on. I mean, that's a possibility because those trees can hear. They can also remember. They've done studies with species in the mimosa family, the ones that their leaves close up when they're touched.
Mm-hmm.
And they took those plants and they dropped them, the pot, and just let it, kind of jar, and those plants would close up. Well, after a while, they realized that there was no threat from the pot being dropped, and so they stopped closing up. And so they said, well, this is just like, we've exhausted the chemical mechanisms that cause these leaves to draw up. So what they did is they waited, I think it was 3 weeks, and they dropped the pot again, and the plant didn't close up. So the plant had the memory of the fact that, when the pot was dropped and there was just a jar, it's nothing to be worried about. It's not an herbivore coming trying to graze on it. Same thing with a plant that I can't remember if it might have been a tomato plant or it might have been a bean plant. I can't remember the exact plant they did the study with, but they would have every day a light come on at different intervals. But before the light would come on, they would turn on a fan and blow on the plant. Well, after a while, they got to where they didn't turn on the light and they would just turn on the fan, and that plant would start to move towards that fan because it knew that the light, it remembered that the light was going to come on. Wow. So if you think about plants and how they have these senses and they have their own form of intelligence and memory, it can help you in a lot of ways because, you wouldn't think about that. Like if you think about water, you would be like, oh, well, it can sense the moisture and the roots are growing towards the moisture. It's like, it doesn't even have to sense the moisture. It can just hear the water. If it hears running water, it knows that, hey, I want to send out roots out that way because there I can hear, the brook or stream, running down the hill or whatever it is.
Huh. Interesting. And they also, and plants, I think people know this, I guess, to some extent, is that they, since they can't move, they have their own forms of self-defense, and their own ways of protecting themselves, some better than others, right? But they can emit certain chemicals that it's not palatable to animals, and they won't be eaten. They have a million different strategies of spreading their seed, which is which is the basic process is survival, right? If you can't reproduce, then what the hell are you doing here? Kind of a deal. So yeah, there's a million things about plants to be actually amazed by sometimes. It's like, wow, I just never thought, because when you go through, a pile of animal manure, and some things are digested and some things aren't, and that's because the plant doesn't want you to digest it. It wants you to wants that animal to carry it for a couple days and to end up on the other side of the farm and spread that seed to a different spot, and so yeah, they're and then my favorite plant on the farm is the cucumber, which it just attaches to the skin of the animal or the hair or your clothes or all in your dog's fur, and those things are just seed pods, and you rip them off and you open them up and there's just seeds everywhere, and it's like, this is terrible. I mean, that is the one thing, and I will be absolutely 100% honest with you guys, although I haven't done it yet. That is the one thing I'm consider using poison on, because it's such a pain in the ass. My dogs get into those cucumber patches and they just come covered with them, and it's like they're long-haired dogs, and it's just like,
I think the plants are the ones that are really playing the 5D chess. They're playing the super long game.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But it's especially some of these and we can talk about this some other time or now. I mean, plants just have all these different mechanisms for survival. When they and we talk about weeds, and weeds are just part of the succession system of a natural ecosystem, right? Weeds are there because nothing else was growing there. Most of the time, right?
Pioneers, right?
Right. And you go, oh well, you'll hear the term broadleaf weed. Well, we're talking about solar collectors, and their way of competing is to grow, open up, spread out all these leaves, and deprive everything else growing around it from the sunlight, and it just hogs the sunlight. And that's their strategy, and it's like, they're, that's their one trick. They have one trick. Well, these plants have some kind of trick to them, and that's a broadleaf weed, and some are, they'll pop up in the springtime and immediately go to seed, before, they'll just produce the seed as fast as they can, because they know that, their chances of survival are pretty minimal over a long season. So they just get that seed thing out of the way at the beginning of the season and then go on about their business, and it's like, because really, other than like Bermuda grass or any kind of rhizome that grows in the weed grass that gets in your garden that you don't want it to be there, weeding is not really that hard of a problem, except in the cases of rhizomes. It's like, just get rid of the weed before it goes to seed and it won't come back next year. But the soil is full of seeds though, and they're gonna pop up as soon as you disturb the soil a little bit. It's going to uncover a seed and it's probably going to grow, but it's not going to be this, everybody knows what a really shitty thing a weedy garden can be that wasn't tended, because it's just a mess, and it's just like you got to fight to get through everything. And but if you can keep keep it from going to seed and cut it down, dig it up, whatever you need to do, and you do that over a period of time, especially if you're doing a no-dig garden and you're not tilling and turning up that seed bed, you can keep it relatively weed-free. It's never going to be 100%. You're going to just have seeds blowing in. The most pristine gardens in the world. You get weed seed blown in or carried by animals, and they're going to pop up. So weeding is you're never done weeding, but you can make it a lot easier on yourself that way.
Now, John, have you seen like improvements in your pasture by doing the rotational grazing
Yes.
on certain plant species? I guess it's like I guess some that would be, I guess, not as beneficial in your pasture kind of get eaten
Yeah.
out.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's other than the cucumber, those are a pain in the butt. Thistles, there's a when I first moved here, there were a lot of thistles in a lot of different areas, and I credit my donkeys for being big thistle eaters. They eat the top. The cool thing is they just eat the seed head off the top. It's like, well, that kind of cuts down its spreading.
Yeah.
And plus, the way a thistle grows, it's one of those nasty broadleaf things. It only grows maybe 2 or 3 inches. Well, the base of it, before it shoots up the seed head, probably only grows an inch or 2 off the ground, and it just immediately spreads out all of its leaves, and just like anything within like a foot radius of that plant, it's covered by a leaf, and ain't nothing growing underneath there. And you got to dig them up, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. But once you get cows trampling on it and the donkeys eating the seed heads off, they're still there, but they're certainly not in the numbers that they used to be. I'm seeing some different grasses grow in there. Some of them I haven't identified yet, but it's changes for the better all the time. It certainly looks a whole lot better. This next season, I'm going to experiment without, I'm not going to, I shouldn't say I'm not going to, I will suspend my bush hogging until the fall and let it just grow all summer long. One of those is because of this horrible drought that we had, the last 2 years. This is the more canopy you can have on your pasture, and we've talked about that, the less, the less evaporation of the water out of the ground. It keeps the temperature of the ground much cooler, and things can survive and continue to grow even during a drier period of time. So I'm going to experiment with that. So the answer is yes, definitely, but there's these little experiments I want to keep doing to see what happens. One of them's planting trees to create more shade. The others, hey, maybe we just let the pasture grow all summer and just let the cows graze it down and not worry about weeds and seed heads other than cucumbers, which I may take some corrective action. But yeah, it's I'll have to say it's a pleasure watching some of the areas improve, because a lot of my land was pretty degraded when I bought it. It's hilly. Some of those hillsides, I mean, a lot of that broom sedge would grow in there, and that's just an awful plant. The cows, animals, nobody eats it. It looks like wheat that that you forgot to cut down and growing in the middle of your pasture. In the winter it gets brown and nasty looking, and that really is only a symptom of overgrazed pasture. All the good grass has been eaten down and destroying the root system by being overgrazed, and so whatever grows that they don't eat is what's gonna thrive after a period of time. So with rotationally grazing, it's improved quite a bit, because they say the best way to defeat a weed in a pasture or a lawn, not in a garden. You obviously don't want to necessarily do that. Is through competition, healthy competition. Have really healthy grass, real healthy plants that are growing out in your pasture outcompete with the trashy stuff, and eventually that'll happen. With some management, you can have a fairly clean pasture and yard too. But yeah, I'm not big. I haven't done anything to my yard because it's about 1.5 acres, so I'm not going to be out there fertilizing, reseeding it and aerating it. It's like, I'm sorry, man. I got pastures I got to take care of. That's much more important than how my yard looks. Which looks fine after it's cut, but a little shabby from time to time. But, it's okay. It's okay. But
just chimed in, grass is for yuppie chumps, no disrespect. I kind of have the same sentiment. It's like you want this perfect grass in your yard, and what is it really buying you?
I hate it.
Looking pretty.
That's kind of like a suburban HOA kind of,
You mean hell?
Yeah, basically.
Are you talking about Dante's Inferno?
Because believe it or not, that same mentality spills out to people who live on farms, and they will mow all the time because it looks nice, and it's not because the pasture does well, but it's because it looks nice and neat.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a yard, if you have a specific, like if you want a place for your kids to be able to run around, but there's no need to have like an acre yard.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I mean, you are not going to put in a football unless that's your thing, unless like the whole family, they're like, we love American football and we play it all the time. It's like, all right, fine. Put in an acre yard and play your football. Or like, my dad, he's real big into golf, so he wants to continue to mow his 3 acres. And I'm just like, well, if the place don't go somewhere, you don't sell it when you're dead, like it's all going to become trees.
I know you're putting a lot of work into it, but one of these days it's going to be
one of these days it's going to go to crap.
All right,
all right.
Yeah, amen. If there's a utility, it makes sense. All right. Yep. Well, you guys are up on an hour here. If we're going to go around the horn and tell people where people can find you and support you, and then we'll wrap it up for the week.
Yep. John Tejan, DJ Cattle Company. I'm on X under Soul Survivor 78. Getting ready to see how many cows I'm going to have available to sell for next year. So we're booked up through the end of this year and first part of next year. So we'll see what we're going to have in the fall. So hopefully we'll have plenty for everybody.
Awesome.
Awesome. So Hideaway Homestead on YouTube, on X, and if you want to get in contact with me, you can email me at hideawayhomestead@gmail.com. Check out my channel. Zach, I don't know if you're from Greg's channel or my channel, but thanks for coming and hanging out. And if you're from mine or from his, go check the other channel out. We got a lot of stuff on both of our channels.
Yeah, Logan, don't you have some kind of Etsy shop or something that you were going to talk about?
Yes, thank you. Shameless plug here. I forgot. I've got on Etsy. I've started selling cuttings on there, and people are buying them right now. You can get the cuttings and start them in pots indoors right now, and actually get a jump start on spring. But most of the stuff that I sell will grow like 8 foot in 3 months. So be ready to prune it if you're going to keep it inside, or else it'll grow through your roof. But I've been really encouraging people to wait on orders for cuttings, like for February would be the best time. But I mean, you can do it now, because I know, just like John said, sometimes we get that itch and it's like, I need it now. So I'm selling on Etsy, but if you want to get in contact with me and get like a discount, you can email me, and I'm running for anybody who's from my YouTube. I've got like 20 cuttings for $20 on Etsy, and that's just because Etsy's going to take their cut, the shipping and everything. But if you want to get it from me, you can get 20 of the hybrid poplar, 20 of the hybrid willow, and if you want to throw in, I'll send water hyacinth in a bag, 5 small plants, and that's all for $40. But if you want to get just the cuttings, I'll do it for $30. So there's my shameless infomercial right there. And I'm going to have at the mushroom workshops and stuff we're doing this spring, I'll have some bare root trees as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And guys, yeah, this is my channel here, the Tinker Tribe. And then I also do a fitness channel. It's all under Take the Ride 23. If you want to get a better handle on your fitness, you can kind of follow along. Do calisthenics workouts and some stuff in the gym. And yeah, stay tuned for every Sunday. If you like this, give it a like and share it with some friends that might get some good value out of this. And we'll see you guys next week.